Welcome back. When kids are in school, we often talk about setting them up for academic success.
But being successful on an emotional level is important too. Here's a look at how the Boys and Girls Club offers kids the support they need to grow.
The Boys and Girls Club's mission is to serve all young people, but especially those who need us most. And what we mean by that are young people who may not have opportunities for enrichment in equal levels to other young people in other communities. So for example, access to sports, access to academic programming, access to the arts, access to STEM programming or workforce development. These opportunities that level the playing field for all kids and ensure that they gain the core skills that they need to develop and be successful on any trajectory that they set for themselves. We aim to provide those opportunities to level the playing field for those young people. We are very targeted on building a core set of skills, specifically social and emotional development skills. From all of the research that we garner, we know that our young people need a core set of skills to be successful in every domain of their life. And that's from academic success to health and wellness outcomes to workforce development to college and career opportunities. There's the same set of core skills, and we've been able to identify what those core skills are and target our programming and our specific enrichment opportunities to bolstering those specific skills. We teach young people all the time how to have refusal skills, right, to take care of their health and wellness. But if they don't have a strong sense of self or self-efficacy or impulse control, they're unlikely to be able to put those actions into place. This is the same for risk behaviors. So if young people don't have a strong sense of themselves, a concern for their future, self-efficacy and self-worth, they're unlikely to deter from risk behaviors and options when presented to them. The Boys and Girls Clubs, with our caring youth development professionals, often provide a place for young people to share concerns in their life more globally. We know that having one caring adult in your life is a huge protective factor for young people, and our club alumni often say that the club saved their lives. Our club staff are there every day when they get there after school. They know who they love. They go to those specific program areas. They will want to hang out with that staff member all day. And if you ask young people when they're talking about their experiences in the club, they always remember that one person who pulled them aside when something was going on, who they went to when they were having some hardship in their lives. They remember those people as critical to those transitions in their lives, and that far surpasses any other benefit that we could give young people, is to have that caring, consistent adult. I think about development a lot like the game of Jenga. And if you push a lot of pieces out from the bottom, you have a shaky foundation, right? Our young people have to have a strong foundation because we're gonna, as humans, experience hardship and need to experience perseverance through hardship. We have identified specifically the social and emotional development skills, the exact skill sets that young people need that actually make them more efficacious, both in health and wellness and in their leadership domains, but also in academic success. Our newly released Triple Play Social Recreation curriculum has a whole host of team building and relationship building activities. So an activity for every single day that explicitly targets core social and emotional development skills. When young people have a core set of social and emotional development skills, we know they're more likely to overcome hardship. We know they're more likely to persevere. We know they're more likely to pursue academic opportunities and career opportunities, and they're more likely to stay in them. Our major initiative is to embed social and emotional development skills in every single program, because the more touch points a young person has with gaining these skills but also applying these skills, the more likely the skills are to stick, and that young people will be able to put this in practice both in the club and outside the club.
Well, thank you to the Boys and Girls Club of America for sharing all of that information, and you can learn more by visiting bgca.org.